All right, welcome everybody to this presentation. I just need to share the screen. We're going to be talking about integrating place in fiction to create more meaning. So this is in keeping very much with the stream that's going on with this entire conference. And again, welcome everybody. So I'm just going to go into sharing the screen. People can let me know. Okay, so anybody can let me know. Are you seeing this? You're not?
Okay. I can see it.
I can see you, Vera. So thank you. You're my talking audience. Okay, as people trickle in, I'm just going to start because we've got a fair bit to cover, and there is a workshop component to this. So hopefully that will give you a chance to do better writing, actually, and we'll have some time to discuss things at the end as well. All right, so I'm going to be using, just see if this works. Yeah, there we go. This book, Ecology of Story, World as Characters, one of my 3 guidebooks on writing. I'm going to be taking quotes out of that and using sections. And these are the 3 books in the series right now. You can get them on Amazon or various other places, various other bookstores carry it. So I'm going to be reading quotes from there, et cetera, to give examples. If any of you want to ask questions, I'm going to ask you to wait till the end, maybe make some notations, and then we'll open it up to the floor to whoever's here. And we can have a discussion. And for certainly near the end, I'm going to make sure we have enough time to have a little workshop element to this. Okay. So just going to grab my stuff here. Lovely cup of tea and my book. So the first question is what is place? What is it? Think of it as a character. Place functions as a catalyst and molds the more traditional characters, the ones that we think of, that animate a story. Think of your favorite books. Tale of Two Cities, I think I have a list here. There we go. Wizard of Oz, The Odyssey. Each of these books, in each of them, the central character is the place, which is firmly linked to its main character. How much, for instance, is Frodo an extension of his beloved Shire? They're one and the same, just as the London of Charles Dickens spawned Scrooge, or Thomas Hardy, Egdon Heath, shaped Eustacia Vi in The Return of the Native. D.H. Lawrence suggested that the Heath was the most important character in Hardy's book, and here's a quote from D.H. Lawrence. He calls Egdon dark, soiled, strong, and crude and organic as the body of the beast. I love that quote. It just speaks so much to what Hardy has done. Hardy personified trees as interpreters of nature and humanity, from the sobbing breaths of a fir plantation to the stillness of trees in a quiet bog, standing in an attitude of intentness, as if they waited longingly for the wind to come and rock them. So trees, meadows, winding brooks, and country roads were far more than backdrop for Hardy's world and his stories. Elements of the natural world were characters in their own right, and imparted the other characters in a world dominated by nature. So place ultimately portrays what lies at the heart of the story. Place as character serves as an archetype that story characters connect with and navigate in ways that depend on the theme of the story. The story's theme is essential to the so what part of the story. What's at stake for the character on their journey through time and place towards some kind of fulfillment. There's no story without theme, and there's no theme without place. Things to consider about place as character begin with the POV character. That's the point of view character, the character who's telling the story. How they interact with their environment and how they reflect their place. For instance, is that interaction obvious or subtle? Is that environment constant and changing, stable or unstable? Predictable or variable? Is the place controllable or not? Understandable or not? Is the relationship emotional, connected to senses such as memory? And so on and so on. A subtle yet potent example of using archetypes is provided by Annie Proulx's novel, The Shipping Notes. Proulx uses subtle body language of her protagonist to provide a very strong sense of place. The main character, Coyle, displays a self-conscious gesture, covering his strong native chin with his hand until he leaves New York to his homeland of Newfoundland, from where he's descended, a place where he can live a natural and graceful life without apology. Water, with its life-giving properties and other strange qualities, has been used as a powerful metaphor and archetype in many stories, from vast oceans of mystery, beauty, and danger, to the relentless flow of an inland stream. Here's a quote from Margaret Atwood's Penelope. Water does not resist. Water flows. When you plunge your hand into it, all you feel is a caress. Water is not a solid wall. It will not stop you. But water always goes where it wants to go, and nothing in the end can stand against it. Water is patient. Dripping water wears away a stone. Remember that, my child. Remember you are half water. If you can't go through an obstacle, go around it. Water does. Everything is metaphor and story. Ray Bradbury once told me that. That is no more apparent than in a setting and place in which a story is embedded and through which characters move and interact. Metaphor is the subtext that provides subtleties in story, subtleties that evoke mood, anticipation, and memorable scenes. When I write, John's office was a prison. I'm efficiently and sparingly suggesting in 5 words, in what would normally take a paragraph, how John felt about his workplace. The reader would conjure imagery suggested by their knowledge of a prison cell, that John felt trapped, cramped, solitary, stifled, oppressed, even frightened and threatened. Metaphor relies on subtext knowledge. This is why metaphor is so powerful and universal. It's universally relevant. The reader fully participates. The reader, in fact, brings in relevance through their personal knowledge and experience, and this creates the memorable aspect to the scene. Rousseau tells us that place is crucial to human destiny and the formation of human personality. The more specific and individual things become, the more universal they feel. Let's look at 3 aspects of place. The first is place personified. Personification is powerful metaphor that gives non-human things human qualities. It personalizes, energizes, and emotionalizes. Place described through personification can illuminate both characters and their environment in compelling ways. By giving an object, place, or an animal the qualities of a person, personification provides subtle aspects of mood and links the reader to a cocktail subtext of human feelings and struggles. Personification can connect the reader to otherwise known as lifeless objects. I don't think they're all lifeless, but Examples include water, soil, rock, sun, moon, the planet, concrete, paper, whatever. And this maps a larger meaning of the story, putting the character's feelings into the objects around her as the POV character creates a subtle but deep connection with the reader. An example would be the darkness embraced her. The open-throated roar of the river pulled her near. Here's another one from Thomas Hardy. Amid the oozing fatness and warm ferments of From Vale, at a season when the rush of juices could almost be heard below the hiss of fertilization, it was impossible that the most fanciful love should not grow passionate. The ready hearts were impregnated by their surroundings. Just look at the words that were used here, the verbs, the descriptions. In their simplest form, symbols are anything outward that stands in for anything inward or abstract, such as a mood or an idea. As representations, symbols often serve as markers in the story. They may be a talisman, a totem that inspires a shift or awakening. In story, a symbol, particularly a talisman, may come as a gift to a character in need of inspiration. In the hero's journey trope, this is often provided by a mentor archetype. An example in story is the lightsaber that Obi-Wan Kenobi presents to Luke Skywalker to aid on his journey as a Jedi Master. Symbols often recur as motif to incite an emotional trigger or a turning point for a character. Here's an example from Barbara Kingsolver's The Poisonwood Bible, and it depicts superb use of symbol in storytelling. Here's a quote. She is inhumanly alone, and then all at once, she isn't. A beautiful animal stands on the other side of the river. They look up from their lives, woman and animal, amazed to find themselves in the same place. He freezes, inspecting her with his black-tipped ears. His back is purplish brown in the dim light, sloping downward from the gentle hump of his shoulders. The forest's shadows fall into lines across his white striped flanks. His stiff forelegs play out to the sides like stilts, for he's been caught in the act of reaching down for water. Without taking his eyes from her, he twitches a little at the knee, then the shoulder where a fly devils him. Finally, he surrenders with surprise, looks away, and drinks. She can feel the touch of his long curled tongue on the water's skin, as if he were lapping from her hand. His head bobs gently, nodding small, velvet horns, lit white from behind like new leaves. It lasted just a moment, whatever that is. One held breath, an ant's afternoon. It was brief, I can promise that much. For although it's been many years now since my children ruled my life, my mother recalls the measure of silences. I never had more than 5 minutes, peace unbroken. I was that woman on the stream bank, of course, Orleana Price, Southern Baptist by marriage, mother of children living and dead. That one time and no other, the Okapi came to the stream, and I was the only one to see it. So in this opening to her novel, Kingsolver explores a multi-layer symbol for the main character's bewilderment at the mystery and beauty of the environment around her, tied into her own essential helplessness. So part of what makes her symbols poetic is that all of them emerge from the natural world around her characters. Nature's symbols are powerful archetypes that reveal compelling story. These symbols abound in Kingsolver's novel that explore the relationships of 5 women with their environment and the rigid ignorance of their patriarch. That's Nathan Price. The Garden provides many examples of this. For instance, Price planted his seeds in a flat, not accounting for the torrential afternoon downpours, which wash away his garden in a flash. Later, the poisonwood tree in their yard gives Price a horrid rash, suggesting that he's messing with a place he does not understand. So as the quote indicates, Orleana Price experienced a turning point through discovery. In this example, the discovery occurred through a sudden encounter with a natural element. Another example here. From Brokeback Mountain, Annie Proulx uses a mix of senses, but mostly smell, in an evocative description of two shirts to symbolize a love lost. Here's the quote. The shirt seemed heavy until he saw there was another shirt inside it. The sleeves carefully worked down inside Jack's sleeves. It was his own plaid shirt, lost, he thought, long ago in some damn laundry. His dirty shirt, the pocket ripped, buttons missing, stolen by Jack, and hidden here inside Jack's own shirt. The pair like two skins, one inside the other, two in one. He pressed his face against the fabric and breathed in slowly through his mouth and nose, hoping for the faintest smoke and mountain sage and salty sweet stink of Jack. But there was no real scent, only the memory of it, the imagined power of Brokeback Mountain, of which nothing was left but what he held in his hands. Allegory. So allegories are powerful as satires, where they can be. It's a complete narrative, allegory is, whose images and material things represent an abstract idea or theme, such as a political system, a religious practice or figure. The entire narrative is a metaphor in which all components are symbolic. Most fairy tales, folk tales, and myths are allegories. So examples include the Fairy Queen, Frankenstein, Beowulf, those are a few. The narrative of allegory is actually a fractal nest of symbolic names and places and things. Think of some names of people, for instance. Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, Gabriel Oak in Far From the Madding Crown, John Savage in Stranger in a Strange Land. So as satires, allegories make strong social commentary that expose and criticize corruption and foolhardiness of societies. I can think of Gulliver's Travels as a good example. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland as another. Let's look at place as first impression over time through the senses and environmental forces. I'm just going to give examples of each of these. So under first impressions of the Canadian forest, in Barkskins again, Annie Proulx opens her novel with a scene in which René Selle and fellow Barkskins arrive from France in the late 17th century to the still pristine wilderness of Canada. And they've gone there to settle and trade and accumulate wealth. And here's the quote. This is the beginning. In twilight, they passed bloody Tadoussac, Quebec, and Trois-Rivières, and near dawn moored at a remote riverbank settlement. Mosquitoes covered their hands and necks like fur. A man with yellow eyebrows pointed them at a rain-dark house. Mud, rain, biting insects, and the odor of willows made the first impression of New France. The second impression was a dark, vast forest and amazing wildness. Skip it. Yeah, I shall continue. Before we go to place over time, we'll just continue this a bit. The bleak impressions of this harsh environment of Barkskins, Tolman Barkskins. The harsh environment crawling with pests, underlies the combative mindset of the settlers to conquer and seize what they can of a presumed infinite resource. By page 17, we know that mindset well. Renee asks why they must cut so much forest when it would be easier to use the many adequate clearings to build their houses and settlements. And his boss fulminates, and he does fulminate. Easier, yes, easier, but we are here to clear the forest, to subdue this evil wilderness. He further explains the concept of property ownership that's based on strips of surveyable land. Ever mindful of the importance of place, Prue even includes subtle reference to it when first describing her main characters. To bring in another part, first impression. I think that's it. Okay. Place over time. Our perception, if you think of story, our perception of place changes as we change. And the difference between a town is remembered from long ago and how it seems now is a difference between who we were then and who we are now. And this is the same for characters in fiction. Take them anywhere and show them how they feel about a place or how that place makes them feel, and you will reveal to us volumes about their inner frozenness or their growth. And I want to give an example from Alice Munro, Canadian short story author, who really can move characters through time in a way that no other author can. Lynn Ullman, author and daughter of Ingmar Bergman, whose home shifted often, felt herself resonating with the following passage in Munro's story, her short story called Face. And here's the passage. Very short. Something had happened here. In your life, there are a few places, or maybe only one place, where something has happened. And then there are the other places, which are just other places. So senses. I actually want to focus on two senses, taste and smell, for various reasons. Both linger most in memory and yet are often neglected by writers. According to the California Institute of Technology, smell is generally considered the sense tied most closely to human memory. It profoundly influences people's ability to recall past events and experiences. Here's an example from Patricia Hampel's The Florist's Daughter, in which fragrance permeates with meaning. Here's the quote. The flower shop was here, and it was my father's domain, but it was also marvelously other. This place, heavy with the drowsy scent of velvet-petaled roses and Provençal freezes in the middle of winter. The damp earth, spring fragrance of just watered azaleas and cyclamen, all mixed up with the headachy smell of bitter chocolate. Environmental force. So I'm talking weather, climate, forests, mountains, water systems. All of these convey mood and tone, both story and character. These environmental forces are not just part of the scenery. To a writer, they're devices used in plot, theme, and premise. They may also be compelling character, particularly in eco-fiction, climate fiction, speculative fiction, but not necessarily so. Dystopian fiction often portrays violent worlds of contrast between the affluent and vulnerable poor. The aftermath often of economic and environmental collapse. And I can think of many, as I'm sure you can. Wind Up Girl, Snowpiercer, Interstellar, Mad Max. A lot of movies are made that way. But in any fiction genre, It's important to get the science right. Let's talk weather. Okay, so let's skip from there. Weather is, as described in story, can provide powerful and compelling imagery as a force of nature, right? An ocean storm, you can think of the life of Pi, the old man in the sea. In Margaret Miles' A Mischief in the Snow, Captain Edmund Montagu, finally on his way home to his neglected beloved as he returns from a covert mission in Boston. This is in 1766. He encounters a snowstorm in the countryside. And here's the quote. Edmund Montagu reined in his horse for perhaps the 100th time, wondering how he'd ever gotten himself into such a situation. Once he regained the road, he would find the village of Bracebridge. The builders had made enough cuts through the low hills to indicate where it might be. But he'd seen none of them for half an hour due to the snow. Now the increasing gloom had turned to night. There was no point going back. The wind continued to hurl sheets of icy snow at his horse's tail. Because his lantern illuminated nothing more than what whirled around him, he began to feel as though he was walking through an endless box whose dull sides never changed. So here the storm does far more than provide dramatic tension in a difficult journey. It reflects Montagu's inner conflict on the loss of his son, his tardy homecoming, and creates an opportunity to confront the stormy nature of his decisions, his intolerance, stubbornness, pride, fear, etc. So now climate and climate change. Of course, climate change has provided a strong premise for climate fiction, from Emmy Taranta's Memory of Water and Margaret Atwood's Year of the Flood, Kim Stanley Robinson's New York, and he has a number of them. I'm going to focus on The Water Knife by Paolo Bacigalupi. He explores a near future of water scarcity resulting from climate change, and of course, corporate greed and mismanagement. This is how he opens his speculative thriller, The Water Knife, with a strong water metaphor. Here's the quote. There were stories in sweat, the sweat of a woman bent double in an onion field, working 14 hours under the hot sun, was different from the sweat of a man as he approached a checkpoint in Mexico, praying to La Santa Muerte that the federales weren't on the payroll of the enemies he was fleeing. Sweat was a body's history, compressed into jewels, beaded on the brown, staining shirts with salt. It told you everything about how a person had ended up in the right place at the wrong time, and whether they would survive another day. Strong relationships and linkages can be forged in story between a major character and an aspect of their environment. I'm thinking home, place, animal, pet, minor character as avatar, spokesperson for the environment. In these examples, the environmental aspect serves as symbol and metaphoric connection to theme. They can illuminate through the subtext of metaphor a core aspect of the main character. Think of Scarlett O'Hara and Tara in Gone with the Wind. The example I'm going to read is from Barkskins again. The white pine forests for the Micmac. And this quote is missionary Père Crane. He's writing in his journal and in letters to his sister. And he brings the Micmac in, how they are interwoven with the land and the forest. And here's the quote. He saw they were so tightly knitted into the natural world that their language could only reflect the union, and that neither could be separated from the other. They seemed to believe They had grown from this place as trees grow from the soil, as new stones emerge above ground in spring. He thought the central word for this tenet deserved an entire dictionary to itself. In his letter to his sister Marguerite, Père Kern writes, one of the most curious of their attributes is their manner of regarding trees, plants, all manner of fish, the moose, the bear, and others, as their equals. Many of their tales tell of women who marry otters or birds, or men who change into bears until it pleases them to become men again. In the forest, they speak of toads and beetles as acquaintances. Sometimes I feel it is they who are teaching me. To them, trees are persons. In vain, I tell them that trees are for the uses of men to build houses and ships. So the foreshadowing of doom for the magnificent forests is cast by the shadow of how settlers treat the Mi'kmaq people. The fate of the forests and the Mi'kmaq are linked through settler disrespect for anything indigenous and a fierce hunger for more of the forests in the land. So where are we for time? We have quite a bit of time. So I'm going to just go over a few tips for integrating place and story. Because all too often, we find that place is added in. So first step, don't tack setting in, just that. Make it an integral part of the story. And link place to theme. The theme, the so what part. Right? The story resonates with deeper meaning. Don't describe all at once. This is the info dump. From the beginning, we start off with a lot of setting. Instead, work it in slowly throughout the story as needed. Describe selectively and with purpose. And do this through integration and scene rather than exposition. In other words, make it count. Do it from the POV character. Be specific. I'll give an example in a second. Use metaphors, less literal description. This is key because the metaphor comes from the heart in describing. When the POV character is describing, they are describing with feeling, right? So not necessarily literally what they see, but how they feel about something. And through that, we get a much more meaningful description. So similes, personification, I mentioned, other devices. Use the senses. I mentioned sense of smell, and I think that's all I mentioned. But sight, sound, taste, feel, all these senses can be brought in to bear to create a much more rich setting, meaningful again. Show, don't tell. Focus on showing versus telling. Of course, you can tell in story, but showing adds meaning again. So an example I have is, don't say the time is 1940s, show the cars, the radios, the dresses. Don't tell the reader it's raining, show them by describing the dripping trees. Compare and contrast. This is a very powerful way to bring in meaning with the setting and to show what's going on with the POV character. So relating this to the POV character, you're comparing and contrasting the meaning behind their journey. Stories of journeys, after all. So I mentioned details, and here's an example of two different ways of describing something. So in the first example, John took a drag from a cigarette as he drove a sports car along a winding road in the country. So we get a sense, that's fine. But if we add just a bit of detail instead of give generic, then we have, change the name to John, is so generic. I have Vinny sucked on a camel as his red Corvette careered the hairpin curves of Hell's Gate. Now, if you compare those two, the differences, you have so much more with the second because it's grounded in real place. And you have taken the opportunity to add attitude to everything. And that brings us much more in tune with the characters and their journey. Okay, this brings us to this wonderful part, which I'm hoping that you will partake. And it's the writing exercise based on what we just talked about. And it is from page 106 in the book. If any of you will have the book, you can see it on page 106. It's called The Psychology of Place. There's 2 exercises. So this one is about how characters relate to place. So I'm going to ask anyone who wants to join in to partake in this, spend a little time writing the scene. Write about a public place from your childhood that inspires powerful emotions. Describe it from as many senses as you can remember. And then, if you can, make a hindsight connection to you in the present. Link it to who you were and who you are now. If you can. Let's give you, we have lots of time, so we'll give you maybe 5 minutes to do some writing, and then we have time to do a bit of sharing after that, and then we can do questions and answers after. So anyone who wants to partake, go ahead. You know, give us 5 minutes. We'll come back and fine. So is that 5 minutes? I think it's. It's here. Okay. Has anyone done the exercise and would like to share? Because if you do, just unmute yourself. You have two choices. You can put it into the chat or you can read it out.
I'll go. I'll turn on my video too. I didn't get to the final piece of the hindsight connection, so that's about half of a sentence. I got a little involved in the rest of it. So this was really great. This was a lot of fun. Okay. I remember the Trident as a kid in the 80s. My friend's parents owned the bookstore / coffee shop just off Pearl Street Mall. What a delight to go there after school, melting snow dripping off our coats that we left piled at a cafe table before tipping over the liminal space from cafe to bookstore. Turn right immediately to inviting red bookshelves that seemed to stretch to the vaulted ceilings. We could pull out any book, sit and read in the chairs that fit our child bodies, just on that verge between childhood and not childhood. I forgot these memories until, and that's as far as I got on that final piece. So.
That's wonderful. That, nothing like a bookstore, eh? That really paints the scene. See, I would only add, think of, with a bookstore, my first thought is sense of smell. What does a bookstore smell like? So I don't recall you had that in there. I would add that. And even if you have to think of what it smells like now to bring in that memory, right? But wonderfully done, wonderful choice. And of course, linking it to current is also wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing it there. Anyone else? We have time for maybe a couple more. Vera, do you have anything? Oh, here's Bright Flame.
Yeah, I could share the little thing I wrote. And thank you, Nina, for offering this. I'm looking at my other monitor here. There was a hedge around our apartment building, prickly. Stay off it, the super would yell. Small, oval, shiny green leaves through all seasons. I could not distinguish a scent, if it had one, above the garbage rot and incinerator burn background. It was a towering boundary to me as a young one, a line that said, do not touch, do not enter. Nearby was wild area. It smelled rancid organic, and adults said, don't go there, dirty. But when I visited as an adult, the hedge was a low, scraggly perimeter, nothing to fear. And the woods was inviting and alive and leafed out with shades of green, with coolness against the hot city day, inviting.
Oh, I am so there with you. You know, don't you love that the purity of description from a child's point of view? And both of yours examples came through that way. You had that, you brought in the child self in that memory, and that is gorgeous. And the Bright Flame, of course, you added so much sensuality there. It's beautifully done. It's smelling, that sense of smell. So beautiful. Oh, we have time for one more. Anyone else out there want to share?
I can go. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go for it, yeah.
I don't have sentences because I usually just take notes and it would take me forever to write the actual sentences. Okay. But I was thinking of the staircase and the elevator in the apartment building where I grew up in Poland.
and
Okay.
all the memories I have from that space. Like there was nothing really special about the space, but occasionally the elevator would break down and I would have to carry my bike, for instance, up to the 6th floor,
Oh,
or my dog, who was a stray, and the little nuts would just bolt out the door and escape, and then I would have to look for him for hours and hours. So I don't really remember many sensory details. I couldn't like sketch it if I knew how to sketch. But I'm thinking of the events, of the things that happened to me.
Yeah, exactly. That brings to mind. Just your description of it, by the way, is enough to create that scene. And then, you know, you would populate it with things. You'd have to think a little bit more about it to come up with it. But you've got that scene in place. And I'm sure we can all visualize that tension, that excitement, you know, the dog bolting, and suddenly there you are. Everything to do with the dog, right? And so that there's a lot there. And of course, you would remember that. The things that we remember from childhood are very special. They don't even have to be real in a sense, if you know what I mean. They don't have to be factual. But it's what we take with us, and then what we populate our current selves, which is why it's hindsight. It doesn't have to be hindsight so much as just memory. What do I actually remember versus what I don't remember? I don't know if you ever have sisters and brothers who, or anyone who's like a childhood friend who's encountered the same thing you did, and you both have different versions of that event. And I just find that mind-blowing. Every time I compare with my sister, she thought this one scene was horrible, and I thought it was the neatest thing ever. I mean, wow, talk about different viewpoints to something, right? To an experience and how we experience things. That can be a lot of fun to work your way through. But thank you again, all three of you, for sharing so much here. It really is quite telling. It's lovely. We have maybe a couple more minutes. I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments on this session, or anything else for that matter to do with this whole wonderful conference that we're going to discuss here.
I have a question about writing from a point of view of the character. And you touched on it a little bit, but I'm specifically wondering about writing from the point of view of a character who is very familiar with the place. I find, and maybe that's just kind of where I am in my writing, it's a lot easier to describe a place and to do a good job if the character is new to that space.
True.
Because then you can have fun with the things they notice and maybe bring in their emotions and the reason they're there. But if it's a place they are very familiar with, to a point that they almost don't notice it, I was wondering if you have any advice on how to go about describing it and still make it interesting without kind of leaving that point of view that you want to stay in.
Yeah, so this is the point of view character. Now, a couple of devices, obviously, is if you bring other characters in with point of views, that's like cheating in a way, but that's one way of doing it. But it is also wonderful to that provides that contrast that I was talking about before. And you know, two different, like me and my sister, seeing the same thing and experiencing it very differently. Therefore, you know, it's almost like a different place. If it's simply that point of view, let's say, for instance, particularly if the story is told in first person and you're stuck with that one point of view and no other, then there are subtle ways of introducing peculiarities about the place through other characters, through dialogue and or you know their descriptions of things that then show just how your character isn't noticing things. Other ways are to place them in other areas. I don't know if they're only stuck in that one spot or move them from there to elsewhere and then have them remember the place that they never noticed in other ways. So again, I don't know enough about your story, but by getting them out of their comfort zone somehow will bring them there. And even in the same place, so let's say they're in place A, you would change them over to place B, which is new, and then they could compare without even realizing and realize how much place A they miss and therefore do notice when they didn't notice before. So there's changing through time, right? But also through place. So to go back to through time, you can keep them in place A, but as things change, if they themselves are under duress or something, not unlike, you're seeing it with the doggy, for instance, suddenly you can see that same boring place in a different way. And you will notice things, even though you've never really noticed them before, under different circumstances. So something, if you're able to introduce something that changes their perspective of the same place, either through conflict, forcing them to see something even through a mirror, like literally through a mirror, which is a different perspective. I bring the example of a road that I travel every day. And one day I spent time, for some reason, looking through the rear view mirror and going, wow, never seen it this way before. Because I would do a loop, right? I never always went in, it's a one-way thing or something, and I couldn't go back the way I'd come. But I decided to look through the rear view mirror, and it was like suddenly I was in a different world. And it was simply because I was looking at it from a different angle. You can introduce those types of things in a literal environment to convey the metaphoric change, and vice versa. You create a change in attitude or something that then provides them with a different way of seeing it. If they're seeing, something through sadness, the same thing that used to be so happy, and now suddenly it's garishly happy in contrast to how they feel. So you can literally take a boring scene and make it not boring through the character's change in attitude, etc. And that will change their observation as well. Is that sort of helpful?
Yes, definitely. Thank you. And I have a follow-up question, if I may, unless someone else has questions. So if I use change in a character to describe the place then cannot be a character in their own right.
Well, it can,
And,
it just doesn't have a voice.
Okay.
Or POV, right? I mean, a character, place as character can have a silent voice. It can still be a character, even with a silent voice. I use that term character in a more open way to it sort of indicates or reminds the writer that place is interactive with your POV character, let's say. Human, okay? Most of our main characters are humans. They don't have to be. I really want to see more stuff, adult stories as opposed to kids stories that focus on others. But anyway, that's just my thing. So your main character is going to interact with environment as character or place, or like a room. That room can still be a character. It just doesn't speak, right? But it's still a character in that your character interacts with it, likes it, doesn't like it, smells it, sees it, feels it, and it in turn may interact in its own right, depending on what it is. It doesn't have to be haunted or anything, but it can have character, literally character, and therefore be a character. Yeah, kind of making sense in any way?
Yes, that helps. Thank you.
in other words, and it's about agency, right? Agency and voice. And those are different things. Agency is, it has some power to do something. It doesn't necessarily have to have voice, and vice versa. And again, voice, what does voice mean? It simply means it's exchanging something with the reader. If you think about it. And that can be through the other character or through some other device in your writing and telling your story. And again, it depends on if you're using third person limited or first person, or omniscient voice. And this is why omniscient voice kind of works in some weird ways, despite its other limitations, in that it can play around with stuff like Thomas Hardy was doing. He was using omniscient voice, right? The voice of God telling us about everything. By doing that, he's able to manipulate the voice of other things that don't necessarily have a voice. So those are things to consider. I think we're out of time. Any other quick questions? Otherwise, we'll end the session. And I'm just very happy that you came. And hopefully you got something out of it. I got something out of it. I always get something out of it, especially when people share, which is wonderful. Just wonderful. I think I do have.
Thank you, Nina.
Oh, you're very welcome. And this is just my contact information in case you want to follow up or anything. I do have an email, but you can probably find my email at any of these sites. So talk to me, that's fine too. So again,
You're not on Twitter, are you, Nina?
I am on Twitter. I'm not on Facebook.
Okay, because I haven't found you on Twitter to copy you on all the things about the conference.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Alien Next Door. That's me. Alien Next Door.
I also looked for you and couldn't find you, but I found you now.
Okay. Excellent. Again, thank you all for coming. Have fun at the rest of the conference, and the awards is going to be exciting. So take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.